Judge Grayson thought he was sentencing a clueless teen until the defendant started dismantling the case like a seasoned lawyer. The Los Angeles County Courthouse buzzed with an energy that felt heavy, the kind that pressed on everyone's shoulders. The gallery was packed, a low hum of whispers filling the benches as the young defendant stood beside a table that looked too big for him. Hands resting casually at his sides, head tilted with quiet defiance. Jalen Dawson, just 19, accused of stealing a luxury car and resisting police. The charges could bury him, yet the way Judge Walter Grayson studied him made it clear the verdict wasn't just about evidence. It was about perception. Grayson leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers against the polished bench, peering at Jalen with a smugness that played to the crowd. "You think this is law school, son?" His tone dripped with condescension. "This isn't a debate stage." Laughter trickled through the room. The bailiff smirked. The stenographer shook her head. Even the prosecutor chuckled, but Jalen didn't crack. He'd been preparing for a moment like this for years. Not as a defendant, no, he never imagined that. But he knew the courtroom better than most rookies with a bar card. While others obsessed over football scores, Jalen studied precedent. When his friends were glued to Xbox, he was rehearsing mock cross-examinations in his mind. His mother, Denise Dawson, had been a paralegal for 2 decades, and her late-night stories of sloppy lawyers and biased judges had been his textbooks. By 14, Jalen could dissect a trial with precision that stunned even adults, but none of that meant anything to Grayson. To him, Jalen was just another troublemaker in a hoodie. "Let's wrap this up," the judge muttered, opening the file. "I've got somewhere to be this afternoon." Maury chuckles followed, but Jalen allowed himself a barely there smirk. Grayson had just exposed his first slip. No one else caught it. The prosecutor, Mitchell Carrington, rose with the confidence of a man who already knew the script by heart. His suit looked sharp. His voice carried the polish of 100 rehearsed arguments. "Your Honor, the state intends to prove beyond question that the defendant, Jalen Dawson, was apprehended inside a stolen 2021 Audi A6, reported missing hours earlier. Officers pursued him through city streets, where he allegedly attempted to evade capture before being taken into custody. His fingerprints were recovered from the steering wheel. The facts," Carrington declared, "speak for themselves." The words hit with force, and the audience shifted, whispering like the case was already decided. Judge Grayson cast a pointed glance at Jalen, then motioned for Carrington to continue. Striding toward the jury box, the prosecutor's voice sharpened. "The defense may spin a tale that this was confusion, that Dawson is just some unlucky kid caught in the wrong place. But let's face it, what innocent person runs from the police?" The tension tightened across the courtroom. Grayson leaned forward, chin in hand, studying Jalen for a reaction. He got none. Carrington shuffled his stack of papers, eyes gleaming. "Your Honor, included here is the sworn statement of Officer Daniel Ruiz, who identified the defendant as the driver before the attempted flight. The vehicle was verified stolen. The arrest followed proper procedure." Grayson exhaled through his nose, nodding. "Sounds straightforward to me." And to most in the gallery, it did. Stolen car, a chase, an arrest, the kind of open and shut case that barely lasted an afternoon. But Jalen had seen too many trials to be fooled by surface-level certainty. He stayed still, silent. Grayson tapped the gavel once. "Let's hear from the defense." His eyes shifted toward Lisa Thornton, the overworked public defender seated beside Jalen, who had hardly spoken a word since they walked in. She stood, voice shaky. "Your Honor, my client." Jalen's hand touched her arm gently, a quiet signal. She froze, then sank back into her chair. Jalen stepped forward, voice calm. "I'll be representing myself, Your Honor." The room froze. Even Grayson blinked before smirking. "You'll what?" "I'll be defending myself." The bailiff's eyebrows shot up. Carrington let out a laugh that sounded sharp and dismissive. "This ought to be entertaining." But his grin faded the moment Jalen spoke again, because the room felt different now. Jalen adjusted his stance, let the silence linger until it pressed against everyone. "Then finally, before I begin, I want to clarify something with the prosecution." Carrington folded his arms. "Go ahead." You said Officer Daniel Ruiz personally identified me behind the wheel, correct? Carrington's tone was clipped. That's right, and that statement is in his report. Of course it is. Jalen nodded once, then turned toward Grayson. I moved to strike that testimony from evidence. Grayson squinted down at him. On what grounds? Jalen drew his hands from his pockets and gestured at the prosecutor's table. Because Officer Ruiz never saw me in that car. He wasn't even on duty when the chase started. A ripple of whispers ran through the room. Carrington frowned, caught off guard. What are you implying? Jalen took another slow step. If the court permits, I request Ruiz's GPS records from that night. If his report matches his location data, but I suspect it won't. The gallery erupted with low murmurs. Grayson's gaze slid toward Carrington. The prosecutor cleared his throat, jaw stiff. Your Honor, we're not about to elevate the claims of a defendant over sworn law enforcement testimony. Jalen shrugged lightly. If the officer was where he said, the GPS will prove it. If not, the silence did the rest. Grayson leaned back, studying Carrington. Any objection to verifying those logs? Carrington hesitated, long enough for the jury to notice, long enough for the judge to notice, and that pause spoke louder than any word. Grayson sighed. Carrington finally shook his head. No objection, but the damage was done. For the first time, the room wasn't laughing. The silence felt sharp, and Carrington's confidence began to fray. He shuffled his papers, grasping for footing. Your Honor, while we wait on those records, we still have one undeniable fact. The defendant's fingerprints were recovered from the wheel of the stolen Audi. Jalen tilted his head, expression unreadable. That's true. He stepped closer to the jury, his voice measured. But let's look at what that really means. The prosecution wants you to believe that prints inside a car prove I stole it. That's the story they're selling, but let's break it down with logic. Jalen inhaled slowly, his voice level deliberate. Imagine walking into a department store, slipping on a jacket for a moment. You slide your hands in the pockets, zip it up, then hang it back and leave. Later that day, someone else actually steals it. Do your fingerprints mean you committed theft? A couple jurors exchanged wary looks, and a murmur rippled through the benches. But Jalen pressed on. The Audi in question had been sitting outside a 7-Eleven hours before the so-called theft. I was inside that store with friends. When we came out, I leaned against the car. It was unlocked. I opened the door, glanced inside. A dumb, careless moment. Nothing more. I didn't drive it, didn't take anything, didn't steal. He let the silence stretch, then sharpened his words. Does touching something make you a criminal? Carrington cleared his throat, rifling through papers, desperate to find footing. Jalen didn't let him. And since we're talking evidence, let's discuss the fingerprint analysis. He turned toward the bench. Your Honor, did the prosecution subpoena the forensic examiner who handled this evidence? Grayson hesitated, his eyes cutting toward Carrington. The prosecutor stiffened, then muttered. Jalen's lips curved faintly. So the state builds its case on forensic proof, but never calls the actual expert who processed it. No chance for me to question the chain of custody, no chance to test its reliability. Carrington's jaw flexed. Jalen gave a small nod, as though that told the jury everything they needed. Interesting. Grayson exhaled through his nose, rubbing the bridge like the weight of the trial had just grown heavier. And Jalen wasn't done. He stepped forward, voice tightening with precision. Your Honor, I'd like to admit into evidence a statement from the car's rightful owner. Grayson frowned. The owner. Jalen nodded. Raymond Whitaker, registered owner of the Audi, gave police a statement that somehow never found its way into the prosecution's files. And I think I know why. He turned, locking on Carrington. Do you recall what Whitaker said the night his car was taken? Carrington froze, jaw tight. Jalen didn't wait. He pulled a transcript from his folder, his voice cutting through the room. I left the car running when I ran into the gas station. Somebody jumped in and drove off. But it wasn't the guy police arrested. The kid I saw was white. Gasps erupted across the gallery. Jalen lifted the paper high, straight from the original police report. The same report the prosecution buried. He looked back to Grayson. The arresting officer omitted this detail. The state ignored it. And yet they want this jury to believe I, who doesn't even fit the description of the real suspect, am guilty beyond reasonable doubt. Carrington surged forward, scrambling to recover. Your Honor, this is irrelevant. The defendant was caught in possession of the vehicle, but Jalen shook his head. No, I wasn't. His tone didn't rise, but it sliced through the noise with clarity. I was picked up blocks away, walking home with snacks I bought with friends. I wasn't behind the wheel, I wasn't near the car, I wasn't running. The only thing connecting me to this case is sloppy police work and assumptions. Grayson rubbed his temple, the case unraveling in real time. Jalen turned toward the jury, his voice steady. The actual thief slipped away that night. The officer saw a black teenager in the area and decided that was close enough. That's what this trial is really about. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence. Grayson cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and asked flatly, "Does the prosecution have anything else?" Carrington's face was flushed, his body rigid. "No, Your Honor," Grayson exhaled, his gaze lingering on Jalen before shifting to the jury. Then he leaned forward, speaking the words that froze the entire room. Case dismissed. For a moment, stunned silence, and then chaos. Half the gallery gasped. Reporters scribbled furiously. Whispers darted from bench to bench. Jalen stayed still, letting the weight of the moment sink in. Grayson's gavel rested in his hand, but his eyes carried something new, recognition, maybe even regret. Jalen met his gaze briefly, then turned to walk out. Just as he reached the door, Grayson's voice called out, "Mr. Dawson." Jalen stopped, not turning. "You should consider law school." Jalen smirked faintly. He didn't need to consider it. He was already heading that way. Outside, the courthouse steps exploded with noise. Reporters closing in, cameras flashing, microphones thrust like spears. "Jalen, did you expect dismissal? What's your next move? How did it feel to outsmart the prosecution?" He pulled his hood up, ignoring the storm. This wasn't about showing off. It was about something bigger. At the bottom of the steps, his mother, Denise Dawson, waited with arms folded, her expression caught between relief and frustration. For a moment, she just stared at him, then finally shook her head with a long breath. "Boy, you nearly gave me a heart attack." Jalen laughed softly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Had to take the chance, Ma." She studied him, then pulled him into a fierce hug. "You've always been stubborn." The cameras flashed endlessly, but Jalen barely noticed. Across the street, Judge Grayson stood by his car, watching. The arrogance he carried earlier was gone, replaced with quiet reflection. What was supposed to be a routine case, another guilty plea on a crowded docket, had become something else entirely. He knew this one would stick with him, because Jalen Dawson had just done what most never dared to try. He made the system look at itself, and for once, it blinked first. The real question that hung in the air was simple. How many times had this already happened? How many lives were decided not by facts, but by bias, by shortcuts, by a system that prized quick convictions over real justice? Jalen had the rare advantage of knowledge, the ability to challenge what most people couldn't. But what about the ones who never had that chance? This was bigger than a single trial. It was about all of them. And Jalen understood what came next. That courtroom wouldn't be the last one he entered, but the next time he stood before a judge, it wouldn't be as a defendant. It would be as an attorney. And when that day arrived, he wouldn't be standing alone. If this story made you stop and think, even for a moment, share it. Because the justice system runs on laws, but it's shaped by people. And people can change, but only if we push them to. So hit that like button, subscribe for more stories that matter, and remember, the next Jalen might not be a stranger. It might be someone you know.